Okay, let's look at Sabbath days and holy days. Here are some examples of bondage that are sometimes tried to be imposed upon the believer. Some will say that it's wrong to do any work on the Sabbath day. So we need to observe it just as people did under the Old Testament. Some believe that the saint should observe the Old Testament feasts. I've bumped into people that at times try to observe Old Testament feasts. Some will judge how one observes Christmas or Easter or some other holy day. Look with me at Colossians 2. Colossians chapter 2, 16. Let no man therefore judge you in meat or in drink or in respect of an holy day or of the new moon or of the Sabbath days. Now, by the way, that's the only time that Paul uses the word Sabbath. So whatever you conclude about how you should observe the Sabbath, it should be on the basis of that verse. And what Paul says about it is what? Don't let anyone judge you as to it. Look with me at Romans 4:14, verse 5. I've had people tell me before that I shouldn't work on the Sabbath day. And the way to think about that is Colossians 2. I'm not going to let them judge me in that. But notice that there's some other instructions on this subject as well. Romans 14, verse 5. One man esteemeth one day above another. Another esteemeth every day alike. Let every man be fully persuaded in his own mind. He that regardeth the day regardeth it unto the Lord, and he that regardeth not the day to the Lord he doth not regard it. He that eateth, eateth to the Lord, for he giveth God thanks, and he that eateth not to the Lord he eateth not, and giveth God thanks. Now let me make this point. If you think that you shouldn't work on the Sabbath today, then are you thinking then that we are under the Old Testament law, or that we need to observe the Sabbath as they did under the Old Testament law? Because if that's what you think, then the issue with the Sabbath is not simply that you don't work on the Sabbath, it's that you stone your neighbors that do. Right? The Old Testament law doesn't just say don't work on the Sabbath. It also has examples, at least one that I can think of, where when the neighbor works on the Sabbath, what do? You stone him. Now, I don't suggest you do that. Because one, they'll lock you up. And two, it would be doctrinally wrong. Because you are judging that man in respect of a Sabbath day, which Colossians 2 tells you not to. Romans 14, verse 5, I would suggest that what you ought to do is you ought to esteem every day alike. I think that would be the scriptural way to think about it today. Look with me at Galatians 4. Galatians chapter 4. Galatians 4, verse 9. But now, after that ye have known God, or rather are known of God, how turn ye again to the weak and beggarly elements whereunto ye desire again to be in bondage? What Paul says there is, how can you, after you've known the truth, can you turn back to the weak and beggarly elements of the law? Then notice verse 10. Ye observe days and months and times and years. Did they observe some things? Some holy days, some Sabbath days? Notice what he says about in verse 11. I am afraid of you, lest I have bestowed upon you labor in vain. You know what Paul actually says? So Colossians 2, not only let no man judge you in Sabbath days or holy days, but guess what? If you think they're important, what is Paul's view of it? He's fearful. Because you're observing something that grace wouldn't tell you to do. What he thinks you're doing in verse 9 is he thinks you're going right back under the weak and beggarly elements of the law. You're going back under that bondage. So let me wrap up this and then we'll conclude. Get with me 1 Corinthians 6. 1 Corinthians 6 and 1 Corinthians 10. 1 Corinthians 6, verse 12. All things are lawful unto me, That's true because you're not under law but under grace, according to Romans 6. All things are lawful unto me, but all things are not expedient. All things are lawful for me, but I will not be brought under the power of any. 1 Corinthians 10:23. All things are lawful for me, but all things are not expedient. All things are lawful for me, but all things edify not. What grace does is it says you're not under the law in any capacity. Okay? So all things are lawful for you. That doesn't mean it's okay to do everything. It means that it's lawful to do it. But are some of those things not profitable? Are some of those things not expedient? Are some of those things not edifying? Are some of those things, what 6:12 says, I will not be brought under the power of any. So, for example, going back to the issue of wine for a moment, when it says not given to much wine, it says be not drunk wherein is excess. You don't want to be brought under the power of anything. Okay? So here's what you need to take from this. As a believer, you have been called into liberty. You should let no man take that from you. You should stand fast in it. When the religious world wants to judge you about it, you should absolutely, utterly refuse their judgment. That doesn't mean you do anything you want to do. Your liberty is an opportunity to serve one another in love, is what it is. So you're not under the tyranny of men's opinions, but what you then do is you use your liberty before God in a way that is consistent with the Scriptures that honors Him. That's how you need to think about it. Liberty is not an opportunity to behave like an idiot. You already have, you were doing a fine job of that before. You didn't need any encouragement to do that. Liberty is you're free from men's opinions, you have freedom in grace, and then you live in a way that is expedient, that honors Christ in all that you do. I'm going to conclude there.